everyone, and thank you for joining. My name is Andrew Yukawa, and I am a product manager here at Ferma, as well as your host for today's webinar. We have an exciting agenda planned for you today, centered around generative AI, and with our time together, I want to review that technology, starting with why we developed Ferma as a generative AI solution, kind of our overarching vision for this technology. And then we will get into how this technology can be applied and adapted specifically to the purposes of medical information and communication. And in that process, we will discuss 4 distinct technologies that we have developed that can be applied towards medical information and communication teams. Before we get started though, there are a few housekeeping items I need to just quickly cover. So number 1, this webinar will be recorded and shared post-hoc. Number 2, questions can be asked anytime through our Q&A feature, and we will be reserving the last 5 minutes or so of today's webinar for Q&A, so please feel free to use that functionality. And last housekeeping item here, my intention is to get you guys out of here by the 30-minute mark. So we will try to keep this as concise and succinct as possible. So let's dive in here. And I thought it'd be worthwhile to actually preface this conversation by bringing some attention to Ferma's overarching vision when it comes to generative AI. And I'll explain why this is important in just a bit, but there is a great mental model that I like to introduce and I like to discuss called the Pareto principle. And I like referring to this model, particularly when talking about generative AI and its capabilities. And so the Pareto principle states that things in life are not always evenly distributed. And in the case of effort versus results, certain tasks can drive outsized benefits. So for example, here, sometimes 80% of your results can come from just 20% of your efforts, and vice versa. Sometimes 80% of your efforts drive only 20% of your results. And, I think this is a great mental model because ultimately, when Zoomerex started developing Ferma as a generative AI solution for life sciences companies, what we wanted to do is identify this 80% here, or what's called the trivial many. And what we want to do is find the tasks that are really kind of taking up the majority of your time, but are not necessarily leading to the majority of your results. And so for this 80% of the efforts, what Ferma sets out to do is find ways in which we can automate, if not most of these processes, so that teams can really kind of prioritize and focus and double down on this 20% of the work that contributes to the majority of their results. So a little bit about our overarching vision for Ferma. What might that look like specifically for medical information and communication teams? And, for medical information and communication, this might be a little bit of an oversimplification, but essentially we can kind of break their tasks into 3 buckets that are required to respond to clinical inquiries and provide essential information about manufacturers, drugs, therapies, clinical trials, and so forth. So what are those skills, or what are those tasks? There is writing copy, the physical act of generating medical response documents. There is project management, kind of managing all of the various tasks required to stay on top of the inquiries as they kind of flow through the funnel. But there is also, clinical training and clinical expertise and clinical experience. And so just to kind of tie a little bit of bow on this concept, if we kind of return to the Pareto principle and think about this 80-20 rule, what is it that is really driving the value and leading to tangible benefits? I mean, sure, writing copy and project management are important tasks, but really the value that medical information and communication teams provide is powered and driven by that unique clinical expertise and unique clinical training and unique clinical experience that they offer. So the question then becomes, just to kind of tie a bow on this concept, the question then becomes for Ferma, how do we free up time for medical information and communication teams? How can we help them with project management? How can we help them with writing copy, kind of this 80% of time spent that's leading to maybe only 20% of the outcome? And how can we allow clinical or medical information and communication teams to kind of shift their focus towards the tasks that kind of truly call upon their unique skills and training and to the tasks that are truly driving the value? So just a little bit of an introduction, and what I want to do today is talk a little bit about how ZoomerX has applied its generative AI technology for the purposes of project management and for the purposes of writing copy, and discuss how we can kind of use this technology to really help medical information teams address HCP's clinical inquiries and better generate medical response documents and just overall become a little bit more efficient and a little bit more effective in those processes. So just a little bit of background on Ferma and our overarching vision. Let's kind of sink our teeth into the meat of our discussion here. And to level set and table our discussion, let's kind of first take a look at a step-by-step breakdown of the medical inquiry process. And I understand that there are going to be minor idiosyncratic differences in processes unique to each individual company. But generally speaking, a medical inquiry is going to pass through the following steps on its way to being addressed. And each of these four critical inflection points, or each of these four steps, we feel are a step that is an opportunity for automation and an opportunity for Ferma to kind of help streamline the processes. So what are those steps, right? So the inquiry is first submitted, it's triaged, it's assigned an owner, and so forth. But upon receipt of an inquiry, that owner is likely to either search for existing inquiries, so ones that have already been addressed, or search for existing MRDs that can be reused or repurposed. And the idea here is, why create the wheel from scratch when you can leverage prior work? So they'll likely search internally to see, when a new inquiry comes in, do we have existing work that can be reused or repurposed? In the event that a new MRD needs to be created or an old one needs to be updated, the owner will then search various publication databases like PubMed or Ovid or what have you to find relevant information to support their response. And then finally, the owner will draft and generate an MRD that appropriately addresses the clinical inquiry. And, there are all sorts of rules and protocols around how that medical response document needs to be organized, needs to be structured, needs to be formatted. And so each of these four steps, we feel, represents an opportunity for automation. And I'm excited to share some of the ways in which Ferma has leveraged our technology for this medical inquiry process for each of these four steps. And hopefully we can demonstrate how these capabilities can help medical information and communication teams with project management. So steps 1 and 2 here, as well as with writing copy, steps 3 and 4. So with that, let's dive into kind of this first step here. So an inquiry is submitted. It's likely once an inquiry is submitted that the owner is going to search their CRM or their ticketing system for a similar inquiry. And so maybe, for example, hypothetically speaking, it might look like something like this, right? Each organization uses some kind of CRM or ticketing system to manage the inquiry, assign it an owner, track any status changes. But when this new inquiry comes in, there is a good likelihood that this new incoming query is similar to something that the team has already addressed in the past. Medical information and communication teams, just by way of their day-to-day operations, have likely received hundreds, if not thousands, of clinical inquiries. And so they already have this huge library of already completed, already addressed, already answered inquiries. And, it's much easier to kind of reuse or repurpose past work than having to kind of recreate the wheel from scratch. So what we can do in terms of inquiry search is actually use semantic search to assess the similarity of the new inquiry against already fulfilled inquiries. And perhaps that looks something similar to this, right? So we have this new inquiry that was just received. Dr. Jones would like to know if we have any data on musculoskeletal pain with the Cardis and B-cell ALL, sorry. And you can imagine, some kind of virtual assistant within your CRM, within your ticketing system that tells the owner, hey, for this particular inquiry, how similar is it to something that we've received before? And you can imagine that maybe there is a relevance rating scale on a 1 to 5 rating. You could see the inquiry text as well as the closing date. And so for any new inquiry that comes in, you can search your library of already completed inquiries and say, okay, this ticket or this particular inquiry is similar to what we've done in the past. Can I just kind of reuse or repurpose some of the work? Or can I reach out to that MIC owner who submitted that inquiry for further information, just to kind of streamline and expedite the response timeline and the response process. So a very simple way in which we can kind of use semantic search to streamline a very, very simple project task management task, and kind of help with being able to search and mine all of the existing work that has been done. But in addition to semantic search, another way that we can look at this is through natural language processing. So, I mentioned medical information and communication teams have likely generated hundreds, if not thousands of MRDs. Some of these MRDs may have been, recently drafted. Some may be retired or outdated by a few years. Some may be tangentially related to the current inquiry, and some may actually be the exact specific MRD that is needed. And so, each organization, I understand that there are going to be, again, minor idiosyncratic differences, but each organization is going to have some kind of document management system that houses all of the previously completed MRDs. And you can imagine maybe it's organized by, product. You have various document codes, the title of the document, and the category. So, some type of database or repository of all the completed MRDs from the past. And, when you receive a new inquiry, you're likely to check if an MRD has already been drafted for this particular question. But there isn't really a great way for understanding what is in each MRD, right? Ascertaining the information that is in the document beyond manually opening up that document, reading through its contents, and then making a determination about its relevance and about its relation to the existing inquiry. And, I understand that this can be, somewhat of a tedious, low probability exercise, particularly when all you have is the document or the MRD title to reference. And so what we can then do is use natural language processing to kind of help just quickly analyze and quickly summarize the contents of the existing MRD. So perhaps when you go into your MRD database or your MRD repository, all you need to do is hover over this document code, and you'll get a bulleted list, a quick summary, a quick synopsis of the document's contents. So in this particular example, you hover over this document code, and here are just 3 key takeaways from this particular document. So rather than having to download and open up each document one by one, here you're just able to quickly kind of skim through the document and find and make a determination as to what might be relevant to you in handling this particular inquiry, just to kind of speed up the process once again. So a couple of different capabilities from a project management perspective that we feel can ease the burden on the owner for this medical inquiry process. Just kind of returning to our workflow here, let's start talking about capabilities for writing copy. And that was kind of the second component that we wanted to automate amongst the 3, right? So we talked about, project management, writing copy, and then kind of the clinical expertise and trying to be able to free up time for that clinical expertise. So the second component, writing copy, we've been able to kind of search for similar inquiries. We've been able to search amongst previously completed MRDs. But what if we have to update an old MRD or perhaps even create a new one? So that process is step number 3 here, right? And when you have to update an MRD or create a new one, you first start in searching for applicable citations in PubMed and Ovid and other publication databases. But as I'm sure many on this call can attest to, navigating these platforms can be rather tricky, can be a rather tenuous proposition given just their limited search functionality. And this is what really makes Ferma as a generative AI tool unique. Ferma actually has API access to a variety of life sciences specific resources, like DailyMed, PubMed, clinicaltrials.gov, Ovid. And so we can not only make searching these publication databases much more efficient, we can also update all of our knowledge and understanding and all of our data sources on a daily basis. And so this ensures that you as a user always have access to the latest and greatest information and are not bound or limited or confined by a certain knowledge cutoff date, like something like ChatGPT or Bing Chat. So I don't want to belabor this point too much, but we can see these problems actually manifest in a couple different prompts, a couple screenshots that I actually pulled just last week. So this is Bing Chat's attempt at trying to address this prompt. The prompt reads, list completed trials for AMG 510 or Lumakras. And you can see Bing Chat's answer at face value seems reasonable, but upon diving a little bit deeper, it's also incomplete. So, you'd expect any approved product, let alone one that's been on the market for several years now, to have more than, just a couple of trials. And then we also see that Bing Chat acknowledges that, hey, this information is only up to date into the year of 2021. So, let's see what happens when Ferma attempts to answer this same prompt here. We get a much more comprehensive, complete answer, one that is packaged in this neatly formatted table. We have NCT IDs on the left, study titles on the right. And the great thing about Ferma is that it also provides hyperlinks to the source material. So you always have an ability to kind of dive deeper into any of the cited materials, and there's kind of complete transparency into how these answers are generated. So this is an example of being able to leverage Ferma, navigate the clinicaltrials.gov platform. This next example we'll get into is with ChatGPT. So ChatGPT is a pre-trained model. It's actually a model that has training data that only runs up until January 2022, which means ChatGPT is somewhat limited in its ability to provide, up-to-date information. And we see these problems actually manifest in this current prompt here. So identify and summarize key research on the use of Dupixent for treating pediatric asthma. And ChatGPT, as we saw with Bing Chat, replies that there is a little bit of a gap in its knowledge base, right? So as of my last knowledge update in January 2022, and there may have been developments and additional research since then. On the other hand, if we look at Ferma's response here, we see Ferma actually referencing two studies that were completed after ChatGPT's knowledge cutoff date. So Ferma is able to provide, as I mentioned, a much more real-time clinical picture with those API access to those databases that I referred to, clinicaltrials.gov, PubMed, Ovid, etc. And so, a couple examples here that I just wanted to show and elucidate how Ferma is able to not only find relevant citations to support the clinical inquiry response process, but it's also able to provide information that is up to date and real time and not bound by some type of knowledge cutoff like the ChatGPTs and the Bings and the Bards of the world. So a way in which Ferma can be used to find relevant citations to support the MRD drafting process. But the last solution that I'll cover before opening it up to Q&A is kind of the capability that is maybe the most traditional use case of generative AI. And so we've kind of reached the point where we have our citations, we have our inquiry, and now we need to draft our MRD. But we also know that MRDs have a very standardized, uniform structure, organization, and format to their content. And so this is where we can leverage, all of the previously completed MRDs as training data. We can build an AI system and train an AI system on all its specific technicalities and all its specific nuances, and build a really powerful tool that can consistently replicate the structure and organization of these documents. And so you can imagine this kind of like as a MRD intake form, so to speak. So that enables you as a user to kind of just drag and drop the relevant citations that we found in the last technology. Maybe you provide the model with a few instructive details regarding the inquiry, such as, what is the inquiry? What are the objectives? What needs to be included from the citations? And Ferma can use all this information to generate an initial draft of the MRD and use its generative AI capabilities in a very traditional sense in terms of generating content. And so, for this particular capability, I understand and I want to be cognizant and temper expectations here. But it's all about generating inertia with this draft and generating momentum, right? Getting that first 40, 50, 60% of the draft done. And the idea here is to really kind of transition the medical information and communication team from a role that is primarily creator to a role that is primarily editor, or a role that is primarily reviewer. Because sometimes getting started is kind of the hardest part. And so that, again, kind of tying it back to what we saw earlier in terms of being able to focus on clinical expertise. When you have an initial draft already started and some copy already started, you can really just kind of focus on leveraging that clinical training and leveraging that clinical expertise to make refinements and make small tweaks and make edits kind of in the margins to kind of get you from 60% to 100%. So lots of information, but in summary, there are 4 discrete technologies that we introduced today that we think can help support medical information and communication teams. The first 2 were related to project management. So those were inquiry search as well as MRD summarization. The last 2 were related to writing copy. Those were citation retrieval and MRD drafting. So 4 technologies in total that we feel can help medical information teams with the project management, with writing copy, and hopefully that helps free them up and reduces some of the burden so that they can really focus and prioritize and double down on the tasks that are driving outsized benefits, outsized results, and that's really coming from their clinical training, expertise, and experience. Last slide that I'll just show before I open it up for Q&A. This is just a similar view that we saw earlier of the step-by-step process flow. All we've done is kind of overlaid those 4 technologies that we discussed. And so you can see at each of these 4 critical inflection points along the inquiry response process, how they can be aided by Ferma's generative AI capabilities and by Ferma's automated capabilities. And so with that, I'm happy to open it up to Q&A, and just give me a second while I orient myself with the platform logistics and take a look and see if we have any questions submitted through the Q&A here. Okay, so yeah, what is the accuracy rate of the third technology of automated searches done by Ferma? So yeah, that's a great question, and actually this is something that we've done and we've conducted some quantitative research on. In response to, there were around 500 queries that we passed along to Ferma. Its accuracy rate was around 75%. And I know 75% maybe it's not 100, but when we compared that to the Bings and the Chats and the Bards of the world, those platforms, those general purpose out of the box large language models were showing accuracy rates somewhere between 30, 40 to 50%. And that gap between Ferma and the more out of the box general purpose large language models is really driven by our ability, again, to tap into all of those data sets in a real time basis. And so being able to make sure that we always provide up-to-date clinical information, we understand that that's paramount. I will also mention that that 75% accuracy metric is a driving force for a lot of the work that we do, and we're consistently making developments, enhancements to the platform, and on a weekly basis, on a bi-weekly basis, we are making small incremental improvements, and so that 75% number is certainly not our ceiling, and we recognize that we're continuing and to make improvements and make enhancements to that metric. Okay, so next question here. How are the results from the automated searches provided to the team member? Is it at the document level? That's exactly right. So Ferma's information that it provides, it will give you kind of a synthesized summary or synopsis of your particular search. And so we can actually kind of see that here. So it will give you a quick, succinct summary of these medical papers or these clinical trials or the PubMed articles. But it will also provide hyperlinks to the source material. So every single Ferma response includes its citations that were used to generate the response. And so you can not only get a quick summary and determine, okay, maybe this article is something that I want to dig further into. I can go ahead and click on the sources, click on that hyperlink, and you'll be linked out directly to the PubMed article on the PubMed website. Okay, next question here. Is there a special platform we would need to post letters to? How long does it take to implement this tool to set up and prep? Yeah, that's a great question. So whenever we develop this tool for our clients, each tool and each development cycle is different depending on that particular client's IT infrastructure and their specific desire on where the platform should be hosted, how it should be integrated into their existing ecosystem, into their existing dashboards. And so the format and the structure and the organization of this solution actually takes a different shape depending on clients' IT requirements. And so that's a conversation that we're happy to help facilitate with your IT team, understand the development requirements a little bit further, and we can make a decision on, whether it makes sense to host internally within your existing architecture and within your existing ecosystem, or can we build kind of an external platform, maybe hosted on ZoomRex servers. Everyone has a different preference based off of their security requirements. In terms of development timeline, that is largely dependent on a few different factors, including, how many different therapeutic areas we're incorporating, how many MRDs do we need to reference, how much data are we trying to process to the system. But I would say development timeline can be anywhere from around a couple months to the more in-depth projects that I've seen, maybe taking up to 6 months to fully develop and implement a system integrated into, again, their existing infrastructure, understand all of their IT security requirements and so forth. Great questions. If I didn't get to all of them, I will be gladly following up with all of the attendees, and I'll have a list of questions that I'll receive. But I do want to just thank everyone for their time. Thank everyone for their attendance, for their participation and engagement in today's session. We hope this was an enlightening experience for you. And I encourage you to shoot us a line at info@ferma.ai. If you have any other thoughts, questions, comments, feedback, we'd be more than happy to connect with you and continue this discussion. So thank you so much. I really, really appreciate it. And I hope everyone has a wonderful day and a wonderful week. Thank you.